My boyfriend told me to reject a $120,000 promotion because it would make him look bad. He said I need to decline the job and take a receptionist position instead. So I demoted him as an ex. Ryan and I had been together for 2 years. I worked at a pharmaceutical company as a research coordinator making $70,000 a year. He worked at his dad's plumbing supply company as a sales manager making $50,000. He always said money didn't matter, that we were a team. I believed him. Last month, my boss called me into her office. She offered me the director of clinical trials position. $120,000 salary, company car, 4 weeks vacation, stock options. I'd worked 60-hour weeks for 5 years to earn this. Stayed late reading protocols, took weekend certification courses, flew to conferences on my own dime to network. When I told Ryan that night, his face changed. Not happy, not proud, something else. He said we should think about it carefully. I asked what there was to think about. He said a promotion like that came with a lot of stress and longer hours, that I was already tired from my current job, that maybe I should focus on our relationship instead of my career. I thought he was concerned about me burning out, but then he started listing other problems. His mom wouldn't understand why I made more than him. His brother would make jokes at Sunday dinners. His friends would think he was less of a man. He actually used those words, less of a man. He said I should consider how my success would affect his reputation. I told him his reputation wasn't my responsibility. That's when he got mean. He said I was being selfish, that relationships required sacrifice, that his ex-girlfriend understood the importance of letting the man be the provider. He brought up his ex-girlfriend who worked part-time at a flower shop, the one he always said was boring and had no ambition. Suddenly, she was the ideal partner. For a week, he sulked. Wouldn't celebrate with me, wouldn't tell anyone about my promotion. When my parents called to congratulate me, he left the room. When my sister sent champagne, he said it was excessive. He started forwarding me articles about women who regretted prioritizing careers over family. Stories about successful women who ended up alone. Statistics about divorce rates when wives earned more. He bookmarked a blog post called How to Be a Supportive Partner Without Losing Yourself and left it open on my laptop. The post was about women stepping back to let their men shine. Then came the ultimatum. 3 days before I had to give my answer, Ryan sat me down. He said he'd been thinking and realized this promotion would destroy us. If I took it, he'd always feel inferior. His family would judge him. His coworkers would laugh behind his back. He needed me to decline. For us. For our future. He'd even called his dad's friend who owned a dental office. Got me an interview for a receptionist position. $35,000 a year but regular hours and no stress. Perfect for when we had kids. Kids we'd never discussed. I said absolutely not. He said I was choosing money over love. That I was materialistic and power-hungry. That no man would want a woman who needed to be the boss. That his mother warned him I was too ambitious. His mother who hadn't worked a day in her life and spent her husband's money on designer bags. I packed my things that night while he was at his buddy's house. Took everything that was mine, which turned out to be most of the apartment since I'd paid for the furniture, the TV, the kitchen appliances. Left him with his gaming chair and the mattress he'd brought from his mom's house. He came home to an empty apartment and called me screaming. Said I was vindictive and crazy. That I'd regret this when I was 40 and alone. That no one would want a woman who put career first. I hung up and blocked his number. But he wasn't done. My phone started ringing the next morning from a number I didn't recognize. I ignored it. Then another call came from a different number. And another. By the end of the day, I had 7 missed calls from 7 different numbers. The voicemails started coming in. The first one had Ryan crying, saying he was sorry and he just needed to talk to me. The second one called me selfish and said I was throwing away 2 years for money. The third one apologized again and begged me to call him back. The fourth one said I was being childish and immature. They kept alternating like that, back and forth between sorry and angry. Camilla called me that night to check in, and I told her about the voicemails. She said to save every single one of them and not delete anything. She said I might need proof later if things got worse. I didn't want to think about things getting worse, but I saved them anyway. Listening to his voice made my stomach hurt and twist up inside. 3 days after I moved out, I was unpacking boxes in my new apartment when the building phone rang. The security guard downstairs told me someone named Ryan was here to see me. My heart started beating fast. I asked how he even knew my address since I'd been careful not to tell him where I was moving. The guard said he didn't know, but should he send him up? I said absolutely not and that Ryan wasn't allowed on the property ever. The guard said he'd make a note of it and escort him out. I stood there shaking for like 10 minutes after I hung up. That same afternoon, my mom called me sounding upset. She said Ryan's mother had just called her crying about how I broke her son's heart. Ryan's mom told my mom I ruined his life by being too ambitious and caring more about my career than our relationship. She said Ryan was so sad he could barely get out of bed. My mom said she told her that Ryan broke his own relationship by trying to control my career and make me turn down a promotion I earned. Then my mom warned me that this might get worse before it got better. She said Ryan's family was clearly in denial about his behavior, and they might keep trying to make me the bad guy. I felt tired just thinking about dealing with his whole family on top of everything else. Monday morning came and I started my first day as director of clinical trials. I felt excited and exhausted at the same time from all the Ryan drama over the weekend. My new office was on the 4th floor with big windows that looked out over the city. I spent my lunch break just sitting in my chair and staring at the view. This was what I worked for. 60-hour weeks for 5 years, weekend classes, conferences I paid for myself. I earned this office and this job, and I felt proud sitting there. Around 2 o'clock, another director stopped by my office and knocked on the open door. He introduced himself as Duncan Steele and said he started about 3 months ago. He offered to give me advice about how to deal with company politics and who to watch out for. He was friendly but not weird about me being a woman in leadership, which felt really nice after dealing with Ryan's insecurity for so long. Duncan told me about the different department heads and which ones were helpful versus which ones just liked to create problems. We talked for maybe 20 minutes and then he headed back to his own office. The next morning, I checked my work email and found a message from an address I didn't recognize. The email said I stole money from Ryan and destroyed his property when I moved out. It said I was a thief and a liar and people should know what kind of person I really was. My hands were shaking as I read it. I forwarded it immediately to Lorelei Kerr in HR with a message explaining that Ryan was my ex-boyfriend who told me to turn down my promotion. I said he'd been calling me from different numbers and showed up at my apartment building. I wanted HR to know in case he tried to contact the company again. Lorelei called me within an hour and asked me to come to her office. She took the situation really seriously and started writing down everything I told her. She said the company had dealt with situations before where someone's personal life affected their work safety. She asked me detailed questions about when Ryan and I broke up and what he'd been doing since then. Then she asked if I felt safe and I realized I wasn't actually sure anymore. I told her I didn't think Ryan would hurt me physically, but I didn't know what else he might do. She made notes about everything and said she'd flag my name with building security so they'd know to watch for him. That weekend, Ryan posted on social media about gold diggers who leave their partners the second they get a little success. He didn't use my name, but he tagged a bunch of our mutual friends in the post. I didn't respond or react to it at all, but several friends started texting me asking what happened between us. Some of them seemed genuinely concerned and others seemed like they just wanted gossip. I didn't reply to most of them because I was too tired to explain the whole story over and over. Sunday afternoon, I met up with Camilla at a coffee shop near my apartment. I told her everything about the calls from different numbers, Ryan showing up at my building, his mom calling my mom, and now the fake email to my work. Camilla got really mad on my behalf. She said Ryan was escalating his behavior and I needed to document everything carefully. She insisted I should think about getting a lawyer or filing some kind of legal complaint before this got any worse. I felt overwhelmed by the idea of lawyers and legal action. I just wanted him to leave me alone, so I could focus on my new job. Monday morning arrived and I had my first staff meeting with my new team. 12 research coordinators now reported directly to me. I stood at the front of the conference room going over our current trials and upcoming deadlines. It felt weird and kind of unreal to be the one leading the meeting instead of sitting in the audience. About halfway through, I caught myself wondering if Ryan was right that I couldn't handle the pressure of this position. Then I shut that thought down hard and kept talking about protocol timelines. These people were counting on me to lead them, and I wasn't going to let Ryan's voice in my head make me doubt myself. After the meeting, 3 of the coordinators stayed behind to ask questions about their specific projects. I answered each one and felt my confidence coming back with every response. I knew this work inside and out. I earned this promotion through actual skill and hard work, not luck or connections. Ryan's opinion about what I could or couldn't handle didn't matter anymore. He wasn't my problem to manage or my ego to protect. I had a whole team depending on me now and real responsibilities that mattered way more than his hurt feelings about making less money than me. Tuesday afternoon, I got a Facebook message from Ryan's brother Mark. He said I embarrassed their whole family and Ryan was crushed because of me. He wrote that I acted like I was better than everyone, and Ryan deserved someone who appreciated him. I took a screenshot of the entire message and saved it to the folder on my computer where I was keeping everything Ryan related. Then I blocked Mark on every platform I could think of. I didn't respond because there was nothing to say to someone who thought Ryan's behavior was my fault. 2 weeks into my new role, I was managing 3 major clinical trials at once. Trial A was testing a new diabetes medication, and we had 200 patients enrolled across 15 sites. Trial B focused on autoimmune disorders with 90 patients at 8 locations. Trial C was our biggest project, a cardiovascular study with 350 patients at 20 sites nationwide. I created tracking systems for each trial using color-coded spreadsheets that showed enrollment numbers, adverse events, protocol deviations, and site performance metrics. During my weekly check-in with my boss, she pulled up my organizational dashboard on her computer and spent 5 minutes just looking at it. She told me the system was exactly what the department needed and asked if I could train the other coordinators to use similar methods. I felt this rush of pride that had nothing to do with Ryan or proving him wrong. This was just me being good at my job because I worked hard and knew what I was doing. My confidence started coming back in small moments like that, when I remembered I earned this position through actual skill. Friday night around 2 in the morning, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I was half asleep and answered without thinking. Ryan's voice came through rambling about how I never appreciated everything he did for me. He said he supported my career and helped me get where I was today. He claimed he always encouraged me to work hard and go after promotions. The total rewrite of history was shocking, but the timing worried me more. Why was he calling at 2 in the morning? Was he drunk or just unable to sleep because he was thinking about me? I hung up and blocked that number too, but I couldn't fall back asleep. The next week, I went to the phone store and changed my number completely. I only gave the new number to my parents, my sister, and Camilla. For 3 days, my phone stayed quiet, and it felt like relief. No unknown numbers calling, no voicemails from Ryan, no messages from his family members. I started to think maybe he was finally done. Thursday morning, Lorelai from HR called my desk phone and asked me to come to her office. Her voice sounded serious and professional in a way that made my stomach hurt. When I got there, she closed the door behind me and said someone had contacted the company's general information line. They claimed I was involved in research fraud and patient endangerment. They said I falsified data in clinical trials and put people's lives at risk. The accusations were completely made up, but Lorelai explained that HR had to investigate any ethics complaints about employees. She needed me to know this was happening and that it was being taken seriously. I felt my face get hot and my hands started shaking. I told Lorelai this was Ryan, my ex-boyfriend who tried to make me turn down my promotion. She nodded and said she remembered our previous conversation about him. An hour later, I was sitting in the HR conference room across from Lorelai while she asked me questions from a form. Did I have access to trial data? Yes. Did I ever modify data without proper authorization? No. Had I ever compromised patient safety? Absolutely not. She clearly didn't believe the accusations, but she had to write down my answers and document everything. I could see in her face that she was just doing her job, and this was all procedure. I explained about Ryan's harassment campaign and how it had been getting worse. I opened my phone and showed her screenshots of messages from him and his brother. I pulled up my documentation folder and printed copies of everything with dates and times. Lorelai took notes on all of it and added the papers to a file with my name on it. My boss got called into a meeting with HR that afternoon. Lorelai needed her to verify my work quality and confirm I followed all ethical standards. My boss came to my office afterward and told me she gave a strong statement about my professional conduct. She said my work was always thorough and by the book. But I could see the concern in her eyes about all this drama following me into my new position. She asked if I was okay, and if there was anything the company could do to help. I said I was handling it, but I appreciated her support. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling until almost 3 in the morning. I kept thinking about how Ryan's lies could actually cost me the job I spent 5 years working toward. Everything I built could fall apart because my ex-boyfriend was mad that I made more money than him. Around 11, Camilla showed up at my apartment with 2 bottles of wine and takeout food. She made me eat something and then poured us both big glasses of wine. She reminded me that the truth would come out and my work record spoke for itself. She said I had documentation of everything and HR would see through Ryan's fake complaint. The HR investigation took 4 days total. During that whole time, I felt like everyone at work knew what was happening and was judging me. I imagined people whispering about me in the break room or wondering if the accusations were true. Every time someone looked at me, I thought they were thinking about the investigation. Duncan noticed I seemed stressed during a department meeting and caught me afterward in the hallway. He asked if I wanted to grab coffee, and I said yes, because I needed to talk to someone who understood workplace politics. We went to the coffee shop on the first floor, and I ended up telling him everything over lattes. I explained about Ryan opposing my promotion, the breakup, the harassment, and now the fake ethics complaint. Duncan listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he told me his ex-wife tried to sabotage his career during their divorce. She contacted his former employer claiming he stole proprietary information and violated his employment contract. None of it was true, but he had to go through a whole investigation that lasted 3 weeks. He said he survived it and rebuilt his reputation. He warned me that people like Ryan count on their targets being too embarrassed to fight back. They think if they make enough noise and cause enough trouble, you'll just give up and go away. He told me the best thing I could do was document everything, cooperate fully with HR, and keep doing excellent work. The next morning, Lorelai called me into her office with a closed folder in her hands. She sat down across from me and opened it, showing me the investigation summary she'd typed up. The complaint was officially determined to be malicious and unfounded with no basis in fact. She'd noted the timing correlation with my recent breakup and Ryan's documented harassment pattern. She closed the folder and looked at me directly. She suggested I might want to consult an attorney about Ryan's behavior, because this pattern of workplace interference combined with the other contact was concerning. I thanked her for handling everything professionally and walked back to my office feeling both relieved and worried. The investigation was over, but Ryan clearly wasn't stopping. I called Camilla during my lunch break and told her what Lorelai said about getting an attorney. She immediately started searching on her phone for harassment lawyers in our area. She found Courtney Mahoney, who specialized in stalking and harassment cases with strong reviews from other women who dealt with ex-partners. The consultation fee was $200 and the retainer was $3,000 if I decided to hire her. I felt my stomach drop at the cost, but Camilla cut me off before I could say anything. She told me she'd lend me the money if I needed it because my safety was worth way more than $3,000. I made the appointment for Thursday afternoon and tried to focus on work for the rest of the day. Thursday came and I drove to Courtney's office in a building downtown near the courthouse. Her office was small but professional, with law books lining the walls and case files stacked on her desk. She was probably in her late 40s with short gray hair and a no-nonsense way of talking that made me feel like she'd seen this situation 100 times before. I handed her the folder I'd been keeping with all my documentation. Screenshots of messages, the fake email to my work, timeline of events, notes from conversations. She spent 20 minutes reading through everything while I sat there picking at my fingernail. When she finally looked up, she told me I had solid grounds for a restraining order based on the pattern of contact, workplace interference, and escalating behavior. She explained the process and how long it would take. Then she warned me that filing might make Ryan angrier before it made things better. Some people see a restraining order as a challenge or proof that they're losing control. I asked if that meant I shouldn't do it, and she said no. It meant I should be prepared and document any violations immediately. I spent that weekend sitting in my apartment thinking about whether to move forward with legal action. Part of me wanted to just ignore Ryan and hope he'd get bored and stop. But another part knew that hoping wasn't a strategy, and he'd already proven he wouldn't stop on his own. Saturday night, my sister called to check on me. I told her about meeting with Courtney and my hesitation about making this more public and official. My sister got quiet for a second, then told me that staying silent never makes bullies stop. They just keep pushing until someone pushes back. She reminded me that Ryan was already making it public by contacting my workplace and posting on social media. I was just making it official in a way that would actually protect me. After we hung up, I knew she was right. I texted Courtney that I wanted to move forward with the restraining order. Monday morning, I woke up to a notification on my phone. Someone had tagged me in a LinkedIn post. I opened the app and felt my whole body go cold. Ryan had created a fake profile using the name Daniel Webb and claiming to be a former colleague from a research position I'd held 4 years ago. The profile looked real with a professional photo he must have pulled from somewhere and a detailed work history. Daniel Webb had posted a review of me saying I was unethical and difficult to work with, that I cut corners on research protocols and created hostile work environments. The profile included specific details about projects I'd worked on that only Ryan would know because I'd told him about them. Details about a disagreement I'd had with a former supervisor and a trial that got delayed due to enrollment issues. He'd twisted everything to make me sound incompetent and dangerous. My hands were shaking as I screenshot everything. The profile, the post, the details he'd included. I reported the fake profile to LinkedIn immediately with a detailed explanation and all my screenshots. Then I forwarded everything to Courtney with a message explaining what I'd found. She responded within an hour saying this strengthened our case significantly. It showed deliberate professional sabotage and proved Ryan was actively trying to damage my career and reputation. She asked me to document any responses or shares the post got before LinkedIn took it down. I spent my lunch break doing exactly that, feeling sick to my stomach the whole time. By end of day, LinkedIn had removed the profile and the post, but I had everything saved in multiple places. Wednesday afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. I almost deleted it thinking it was spam, but something made me open it. The message said he just wanted closure and one conversation, that he deserved a chance to explain his side, and I was being unfair by shutting him out completely. I knew immediately it was Ryan even though he didn't sign it. I didn't respond. Instead, I screenshot the message and forwarded it to Courtney with a note about him somehow getting my new number. She replied quickly telling me that not engaging was exactly right. Any response would just encourage him and show that this method of contact worked. She added the text to our evidence file. That weekend, my parents drove up to visit me. They'd been worried since I told them about everything happening with Ryan. We went to dinner at an Italian place near my apartment, and my dad finally said what he'd apparently been thinking for months. He never liked Ryan and always thought Ryan was intimidated by me. My mom nodded and admitted she'd worried I was making myself smaller to make Ryan comfortable. She said she noticed I stopped talking about work accomplishments around him and changed the subject when anyone asked about my job. I felt embarrassed that they'd seen it when I hadn't fully recognized it myself. My dad reached across the table and squeezed my hand. He told me he was proud of me for choosing myself and my career, that any man worth having would celebrate my success instead of resenting it. Monday at work, I was managing a major trial enrollment deadline that required coordinating between 3 different research sites. We needed to hit our enrollment target by Friday, or risk losing funding for the next phase. I spent the week in back-to-back meetings, reviewing protocols, troubleshooting site issues, and keeping my team motivated. The pressure was intense, but it felt good. Purposeful. Like I was doing exactly what I was supposed to be doing. Nothing like Ryan's claim that I couldn't handle the stress, or that the job would be too much for me. By Thursday afternoon, we'd exceeded our enrollment goal, and my boss sent an email to the executive team highlighting our success. I sat at my desk feeling genuinely proud and thinking about how different my life would be right now if I'd listened to Ryan and taken that receptionist job. Friday morning, Courtney called to tell me she was filing the restraining order petition that afternoon. She'd compiled 2 months of documented harassment into a legal petition with exhibits showing the pattern of behavior. The timeline of contact attempts, the workplace interference, the fake social media profiles, the text from the unknown number. Everything organized and presented as evidence of ongoing harassment. The court date was set for 3 weeks out. Ryan would be served with papers notifying him of the petition and the hearing date. Courtney warned me again that getting served might trigger an escalation. She told me to be extra careful about my surroundings and to call the police immediately if he showed up anywhere near me. I thanked her and hung up, feeling both relieved that something was finally happening and nervous about what Ryan would do when he found out. The next morning, I scheduled a meeting with Lorelai before my team arrived. She sat across from me in the HR conference room with her notepad ready. I explained that Courtney had filed the restraining order petition, and Ryan would be served within the next few days. Lorelai nodded and made notes in my file, connecting it to the previous complaint about the fake LinkedIn profile and the fraudulent ethics accusation. She thanked me for keeping HR informed and said the documentation created a clear pattern that protected both me and the company. She asked if I wanted security to have Ryan's photo, and I said yes. The conversation took maybe 10 minutes, but I felt better knowing the company understood this was serious. Requested Reds is on Spotify now. Check out link in the description or comments. 2 days later, Courtney called me during my lunch break. The process server had delivered the restraining order papers to Ryan at his father's plumbing supply business that morning. She said Ryan immediately called her office and left 3 voicemails, each one angrier than the last. In the messages, he screamed that I was ruining his life and making him look like a criminal in front of his father and the employees. He claimed I was vindictive and that he'd only been trying to have a conversation. Courtney said his reaction was typical of people who genuinely believed they were entitled to access someone regardless of that person's wishes. She added his voicemails to our evidence file because they demonstrated exactly why I needed the protection order. That evening, my dad called me sounding frustrated. Stuart Boyd, Ryan's father, had somehow gotten my dad's cell number and called him at work. Stuart asked my dad to convince me to drop the legal action because it was hurting Ryan's reputation and making things difficult at the family business. My dad told me he'd responded that Ryan hurt his own reputation by harassing me, and that I had every right to protect myself. Stuart tried to argue that boys will be boys and Ryan just loved me too much to let go. My dad shut that down immediately and said if Stuart called again, he'd add it to the evidence file showing the whole family enabled Ryan's behavior. I felt grateful my parents understood and supported my decisions without question. The next 2 weeks passed without any contact from Ryan, which somehow made me more anxious than the constant harassment had. I kept checking my phone, expecting angry messages or seeing his car in the parking lot. Courtney explained this was completely normal when I called her worried. She said respondents often went quiet before court hearings, either because their lawyer told them to or because they were planning their defense strategy. The silence felt ominous rather than peaceful. I found myself looking over my shoulder in the grocery store and checking the locks on my apartment door multiple times before bed. On a Wednesday morning, I opened my personal email and found a message from Ryan's mother sent to an address I didn't even know she had. The email was long, probably 8 paragraphs, begging me to remember the good times Ryan and I shared. She wrote about family dinners where I'd laughed at their jokes and holidays when I'd helped her in the kitchen. She said I was breaking up their family and that Ryan had been depressed since I left. She claimed he barely ate anymore and spent all his time in his childhood bedroom. The email painted me as cruel and heartless for pursuing legal action when Ryan just needed closure and a chance to apologize properly. She ended by saying she'd always thought of me as a daughter and couldn't understand how I'd become so cold. I felt sick reading it but didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded the entire email to Courtney with a note explaining I'd never given his mother this email address. Courtney replied within an hour saying she was adding it to our evidence file. She wrote that his family enabling his behavior and contacting me on his behalf was part of why Ryan thought his actions were acceptable. She said people who grow up with parents who make excuses for them never learn that their choices have consequences. The email actually strengthened our case by showing the pattern extended beyond just Ryan. At work, things were going surprisingly well despite everything happening in my personal life. My team had been working on enrolling patients for a major trial with a tight deadline. We needed 200 participants by the end of the month, and I'd been coordinating between 3 different research sites to hit our numbers. By Thursday afternoon, we'd enrolled 212 participants, finishing 2 days ahead of schedule. My boss brought it up in our department meeting on Friday, praising my leadership and organizational skills in front of the other directors. I sat there feeling genuinely proud of what I was accomplishing. The work gave me something concrete to focus on when everything else felt chaotic and uncertain. Duncan and I had started grabbing lunch together about once a week. It began casually when we both ended up in the cafeteria at the same time, but it became a regular thing where we discussed trials and strategy. He treated me like a competent colleague, never asking invasive questions about Ryan or making the situation weird. We talked about enrollment challenges and protocol issues and department politics. Having a work friendship that was just about work felt refreshing. Duncan never acted like I was fragile or needed special handling because of the restraining order situation. 3 days before the court hearing, Camilla texted me a screenshot from Instagram. Ryan had created a new account using a variation of his old username. He'd posted a series of photos from our relationship with long captions about how I'd used him and thrown him away when I got my promotion. One photo showed us at his brother's wedding with a caption about how I'd pretended to love his family. Another was from a vacation we'd taken with text about how I'd let him pay for everything, and then abandoned him. The posts were public and already had comments from people I didn't know. I felt exposed in a way the private harassment hadn't made me feel. This was out there for anyone to see, painting me as a villain to strangers. I spent an hour documenting everything. Screenshots of each post, the account details, the timestamps, the comments. I saved it all to my evidence folder and emailed copies to Courtney. Then I made my Instagram account private and blocked the new profile. But the damage felt done. These photos and lies were out there in public where my coworkers and friends could see them. Monday morning, my boss called me into her office before our weekly check-in was scheduled. She closed the door and asked me directly if I was safe. Several employees followed me on social media and had seen Ryan's Instagram posts over the weekend. She'd looked at them herself after someone mentioned it to her. She wanted to know if the company needed to increase security measures or if there was anything else they could do to help. I appreciated her directness instead of dancing around the situation. I explained about the restraining order hearing scheduled for Thursday and assured her that security already had Ryan's photo. She told me to let her know immediately if anything escalated and that my safety was more important than any work deadline. The conversation lasted maybe 15 minutes, but knowing my boss and the company were taking this seriously made me feel less alone in dealing with it. She asked if I wanted to talk through what would happen at the hearing so I'd feel prepared. I explained that Courtney had walked me through the process, but hearing it from someone who'd been through something similar actually helped more than the legal explanation. My boss told me about an ex-boyfriend who showed up at her old workplace 15 years ago, how scared she felt walking to her car every day, how the company back then did nothing to help. She said she made sure when she became a director that her employees would never feel that unsafe. The conversation lasted maybe 20 minutes, but I left her office feeling like someone actually understood how exhausting it was to do good work while constantly looking over your shoulder. That afternoon, facilities management called my extension about reassigning my parking spot. They moved me from the back lot to a space right next to the main entrance, one of the spots usually reserved for executives. Security got an updated photo of Ryan and instructions to call the police immediately if he showed up on company property. I sat in my new parking spot after work that day and felt this wave of anger wash over me. The fact that any of this was necessary, that my company had to treat my ex-boyfriend like a legitimate threat, that I couldn't just park in the regular lot like a normal person. I was mad at Ryan all over again for making my life this complicated, for forcing everyone around me to accommodate his inability to handle rejection like an adult. Thursday morning arrived faster than I wanted. Camilla picked me up at 8 because I didn't trust myself to drive to the courthouse without my hands shaking the whole way. She brought coffee and breakfast sandwiches and didn't try to make small talk when I clearly wasn't in the mood. Courtney met us outside the courtroom at 9:30. She looked professional and calm, which helped settle some of my nerves. She reminded me to stay quiet unless the judge asked me a direct question, to let her handle the legal arguments, to keep my face neutral no matter what Ryan said. We walked into the courtroom and Ryan was already there with his father. No lawyer, no legal representation, just the two of them sitting on the opposite side looking like they thought this was all some big misunderstanding. Ryan wore a button-down shirt and khakis like he was going to a job interview. His dad kept whispering to him and patting his shoulder. The judge called the case and asked both sides to present their positions. Courtney went first, laying out the timeline of harassment with specific dates and examples. She submitted printouts of the voicemails, text messages, emails, fake social media accounts, the complaint to my workplace. The evidence filled a 2-inch binder that she placed on the judge's bench. Ryan's face got red while Courtney talked. When the judge asked if he wanted to respond, Ryan stood up and started talking without any clear organization. He told the judge that I was just mad because he broke up with me, that I couldn't handle rejection, that I was making all of this up to get revenge. The judge looked at the timeline Courtney submitted showing I ended the relationship, then looked back at Ryan. She asked him to explain why he contacted my workplace if he'd broken up with me. Ryan stumbled over his words, said he was just trying to warn them about my character, that he thought they should know what kind of person I really was. The judge asked why he created fake social media accounts. Ryan said he needed a way to tell his side of the story after I blocked him everywhere. His answers kept contradicting his claim that he'd ended the relationship. The judge started asking more specific questions about the workplace complaint. Why did he accuse me of research fraud if he just wanted closure? Why did he contact my company's general information line instead of reaching out to me directly? Ryan got defensive and his voice got louder. He said I was ruining his reputation, that his friends were asking questions, that his family was upset. The judge asked him to lower his voice. His father tried to jump in, and the judge told him firmly that he wasn't a party to this case. Courtney submitted the Instagram posts and Ryan's mother's email as additional evidence of the harassment pattern extending to his family. Ryan started arguing that his mom was just trying to help, that I was being unreasonable by involving the courts. The more he talked, the worse he made his case. His anger right there in the courtroom showed exactly why I needed protection from him. The judge took about 5 minutes to review all the evidence, then granted the restraining order for 1 year. She listed the terms out loud. Ryan couldn't contact me directly or indirectly, couldn't come within 500 feet of my home or workplace, couldn't post about me on social media, or have anyone else contact me on his behalf. Violations would result in immediate arrest. Ryan's mouth actually fell open like he couldn't believe there were real consequences for his actions. His father started to say something, and the judge shut him down immediately. Walking out of the courthouse felt surreal. My legs were shaky, and I realized I'd been holding tension in my whole body for the past hour. Camilla hugged me in the parking lot, and I almost started crying from relief. Courtney reminded me that the restraining order was only a piece of paper. Some people respected them. Some people violated them out of spite. I needed to report any violations immediately, not give him chances or try to handle it myself. She said some people escalate after losing control in court because they're angry about the public humiliation. I promised to call the police at the first sign of any contact. The weekend after the hearing, I barely left my apartment. I felt exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with being physically tired, just drained from months of dealing with Ryan's harassment and the stress of legal proceedings. By Monday, I felt more like myself again. Work that week was noticeably calmer without the constant background anxiety about what Ryan might do next. I didn't jump every time my phone rang or check over my shoulder in the parking lot. I focused on preparing a presentation for the executive team about outcomes from our major trials. The data looked strong, and I spent hours making sure my slides were clear and compelling. Lorelai called me down to HR on Wednesday. She showed me the official closure of the investigation file, noting that the court order validated everything I'd reported about the harassment campaign. She told me she was really impressed by how professionally I'd handled the situation, that a lot of people would have fallen apart under that kind of pressure. I thanked her for taking it seriously from the beginning, for believing me when Ryan tried to make me look like the problem. Friday afternoon, I presented to the executive team in the big conference room on the top floor. My boss introduced me, and I walked them through the trial data, enrollment numbers, timeline projections, and budget analysis. I answered questions about protocol modifications and patient retention strategies. The CEO spoke up at the end to say my presentation showed exactly the kind of clear thinking and strategic planning the company needed. He said my communication skills and ability to manage complex projects were impressive. I walked out of that conference room feeling genuinely proud. This was what I'd worked for, what all those 60-hour weeks and weekend courses had been building toward. Recognition based purely on my ability to do the job well, nothing to do with anyone's ego or insecurity about my success. 2 weeks later, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. The message made my stomach drop. Ryan had used his father's phone to send me 3 paragraphs about how I destroyed his life and turned all his friends against him because of the court case. He said I was vindictive and cruel for getting a restraining order over nothing. He claimed he just wanted to explain his side and I was being unreasonable by refusing to talk to him like an adult. I took screenshots of every message before he could delete them. My hands shook a little while I pulled up Courtney's contact info and called her office. She answered on the second ring and I read her the messages word for word. She told me to forward the screenshots immediately and not respond to Ryan at all. She said this was exactly the kind of violation that judges took seriously, because it showed he thought the rules didn't apply to him. I sent her the screenshots while we were still on the phone. She said she'd file the violation report with the court first thing in the morning, and I should expect Ryan to be called in for a contempt hearing. I asked if this meant he'd actually face consequences, and she said yes. Judges don't like it when people ignore their orders right away. That night, I barely slept, worried Ryan would escalate further or find other ways to contact me. But my phone stayed quiet, and I kept checking the screenshots to make sure they were still saved. Courtney filed the violation report on Wednesday morning and called me that afternoon to say the court scheduled a hearing for the following week. She explained that Ryan would have to appear before the same judge who granted the restraining order and explain why he violated it. She warned me that he'd probably make excuses about not understanding the order or claim it was an emergency. The hearing happened on a Tuesday morning, and I took a half day off work to be there. Ryan showed up looking angry and defensive, sitting on the opposite side of the courtroom with his father next to him again. The judge called the case and asked Ryan directly why he contacted me from his father's phone when the restraining order explicitly prohibited any direct or indirect contact. Ryan started saying he just needed closure and wanted to explain how the court case affected his friendships. The judge cut him off and asked if he read the restraining order that clearly stated no contact meant no contact for any reason. Ryan got flustered and said he didn't think one text counted as harassment. The judge's expression got stern, and she said the order wasn't a suggestion. It was a legal mandate with consequences for violations. The judge issued a formal warning right there in the courtroom. She told Ryan that the next violation of any kind would result in immediate arrest and jail time. She said she was giving him one chance to understand that restraining orders exist to protect people from unwanted contact, regardless of the reason for that contact. Ryan's face went red and he started to argue, but his father grabbed his arm to stop him. The judge said the warning was now part of Ryan's court record, and any future violation would be treated as willful contempt. She dismissed us, and I walked out feeling like I could finally breathe properly. Courtney walked me to my car and said this was the moment when most people who harass others finally get that their actions have real legal consequences. She said some people needed to see a judge threaten jail time before they'd actually stop. I thanked her for handling everything so professionally, and she told me to call immediately if Ryan tried anything else. I drove back to work feeling cautiously hopeful that maybe this nightmare was actually ending. The stress from months of Ryan's harassment finally caught up with me, and I realized I needed professional help to process everything. I found Vanessa through my insurance provider and scheduled my first therapy appointment for the following Thursday. Her office was in a quiet building downtown with comfortable chairs and soft lighting that made me feel less nervous about being there. I told her the whole story from Ryan's ultimatum about my promotion through the restraining order and violation hearing. She listened without interrupting, and then said something that surprised me. She told me Ryan's behavior was emotionally abusive long before the harassment campaign started. I'd been so focused on the stalking and workplace interference that I hadn't really thought about how he treated me during our relationship. Vanessa pointed out that demanding I turn down my promotion was controlling behavior designed to keep me dependent and small. She said the articles he sent me and the pressure about his family's opinions were manipulation tactics to make me doubt myself. Over the next several sessions, we worked through how I'd minimized my own achievements during the relationship to avoid triggering Ryan's insecurity. I told Vanessa about staying quiet when his family made comments about my job, or how I'd downplay my successes when his friends asked about work. She asked me why I felt responsible for managing Ryan's emotions about my career. I said I thought I was being supportive and considerate of his feelings. Vanessa shook her head and explained that I was sacrificing my own joy and pride to protect his ego. She said healthy partners celebrate each other's success, instead of requiring the other person to dim their light. I started crying in her office because I realized how much energy I'd spent trying to make Ryan comfortable with my achievements, instead of just being proud of myself. She handed me tissues and told me that recognizing these patterns was the first step toward building healthier relationships in the future. 3 months after the restraining order hearing, I was genuinely thriving at work. I managed 5 major clinical trials simultaneously, and my team respected my leadership without me having to prove myself constantly. I'd stopped second-guessing every decision and learned to trust my expertise and judgment. The trials were progressing smoothly with strong enrollment numbers and good patient retention rates. My boss complimented my organizational systems during our monthly check-in and said the executive team was impressed with my performance. I realized I wasn't walking on eggshells anymore or worrying about what Ryan might do next. The constant background anxiety that had been with me for months finally lifted, and I could focus completely on my work. My team started coming to me with ideas and suggestions instead of just problems, which showed they trusted my leadership style. I took my full lunch breaks without checking my phone every 5 minutes and actually enjoyed the downtown coffee shop near our building. Duncan stopped by my office one afternoon and mentioned he'd heard through industry contacts that Ryan's father's business lost a major contract with a regional hospital system. He said Ryan had apparently been complaining to people that it was somehow my fault for making his family look bad. I felt absolutely nothing except relief that Ryan and his problems weren't mine anymore. Duncan asked if I was okay, and I told him honestly that I didn't care what happened to Ryan or his father's business. He nodded and said that was probably the healthiest response. We grabbed coffee and talked about the new trial protocols coming through our department instead. I appreciated that Duncan never made my past drama into gossip or treated me differently because of what happened. He just stayed professional and friendly without prying into my personal life beyond making sure I was safe. My sister drove up for a weekend visit in early fall and told me within an hour of arriving that I seemed like myself again. She said I looked lighter and more confident than I had in years. We went shopping and out to dinner at a nice Italian restaurant downtown that I could easily afford with my new salary. She ordered expensive wine and I didn't even flinch at the price because I was making good money and could treat myself. Over dinner, she said she'd been worried about me during the relationship with Ryan because I seemed smaller somehow, less vibrant. I asked what she meant, and she explained that I used to talk about work with excitement and pride, but during those 2 years with Ryan, I'd started apologizing for my success, or changing the subject quickly. She said she was glad I left him when I did, because she could see where that relationship was heading. We laughed and clinked our wine glasses, and I felt grateful to have family who supported my choices. 8 months into my director role, the company promoted me to senior director of clinical trials. My boss called me into her office on a Friday afternoon and told me the executive team wanted to recognize my successful trial outcomes and team leadership with increased responsibility. The promotion came with another salary bump and oversight of additional trial programs across multiple therapeutic areas. I'd be managing a larger team and working directly with the chief medical officer on strategic planning. I accepted immediately without any hesitation or self-doubt. That night, I called my parents to tell them, and my dad said he was proud of how I'd handled everything with Ryan and built my career despite the obstacles. My mom reminded me that the right opportunities come when you're ready for them, and I was clearly ready for this next step. I ran into one of Ryan's friends at a coffee shop the following week while I was grabbing my morning latte before work. He approached me carefully and asked if he could talk to me for a minute. I tensed up but agreed to hear what he had to say. He apologized for believing Ryan's version of events after our breakup and said several people in their friend group had distanced themselves from Ryan after seeing his social media behavior and hearing about the restraining order. He told me that Ryan had been telling people I was crazy and vindictive, but then the court stuff became public knowledge and people started questioning his story. He said he felt bad for not reaching out sooner to check on me and wanted me to know that not everyone bought into Ryan's victim narrative. I thanked him for telling me and said I appreciated the apology. He wished me well and left, and I stood there holding my coffee feeling validated that other people had finally seen through Ryan's manipulation. Vanessa started asking me in our weekly sessions why I always qualified my successes with explanations about luck or timing instead of just owning my achievements. I'd say things like I got promoted because the company needed someone or the timing worked out, and she'd stop me and point out that I earned it through years of hard work and skill. She had me practice saying out loud that I deserved my position and salary without adding any disclaimers or apologies. The exercise felt awkward at first, almost arrogant, but she explained that confident women get labeled as threatening, while confident men get called leaders. We worked through specific examples from my relationship with Ryan, where I'd minimized my accomplishments to make him comfortable, like not mentioning my conference presentations or downplaying positive feedback from my boss. Vanessa helped me see that the right partner would celebrate my success, instead of requiring me to shrink myself to protect their ego. She asked me to notice when I started apologizing for taking up space or achieving things, and I realized I did it constantly at work and in social situations. Over several months of therapy, I practiced accepting compliments without deflecting them and talking about my career with pride instead of embarrassment. Camilla called me one evening and said she had a coworker who was single and asked if I'd be interested in meeting him for coffee. I hesitated because dating felt complicated after everything with Ryan, but she promised it would be casual with no pressure. His name was Jason, and he worked in Camilla's marketing department, and we met at a coffee shop downtown on a Saturday afternoon. He asked about my job within the first 10 minutes, and actually listened when I explained clinical trial management instead of changing the subject or making jokes about me being the boss. Jason told me about a project he was leading at work, and we compared notes about managing teams and dealing with difficult stakeholders. The conversation flowed easily without any weird competition or him trying to one-up my accomplishments. We went on 2 more casual dates over the next month, but the chemistry wasn't quite right for anything serious, and we both recognized it. Still, the experience showed me that some men genuinely wanted a partner with ambition, instead of feeling threatened by it. A year after I packed my things and left Ryan's apartment, I was sitting in my office reviewing quarterly reports for the 5 major trials my expanded team was managing. My team had grown to 20 research coordinators and associates, all reporting to me, and we'd successfully enrolled over 3,000 patients across multiple therapeutic areas. The senior director title came with a salary I never imagined making at 32, plus the stock options that were actually worth something now. I'd been on 3 more casual dates in recent months, none turning serious but all enjoyable experiences with people who respected my career. My calendar showed dinner plans with Camilla tomorrow and brunch with my sister next weekend, the kind of regular friendship investment I'd neglected during my relationship with Ryan. I looked at my team's success metrics and felt genuinely proud without any voice in my head telling me to be humble or apologize for doing well. Choosing myself over Ryan's insecurity wasn't selfish like he claimed. It was necessary for building the life I actually wanted, instead of shrinking into the small space he'd tried to confine me to. Well, that's the epic conclusion of pure mediocrity. If you're still watching, you've got commitment issues, and I respect that. Subscribe and let's make this bad habit official.